Hello, and welcome to YA ThrillerCon 2021. This is our panel all about the importance of audiobooks in the YA thriller genre. I'm Madeline Dyer. I'm a YA writer, and I'm delighted to be joined by some great narrators today. These narrators work in the audiobook industry, so it's really great for this panel. So with us, we've got Jayme Mattler, Kate Rudd, and Joniece Abbott-Pratt. We may also be joined by a couple of others as well. We're not sure whether we can get the tech all working, but if so, we'll have others popping up in when we can make it. So yeah, we'll start with some introductions. So Joniece, would you like to go first and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Joniece Abbott-Pratt. I am an audiobook narrator, actress narrator. It's what I call myself. I've been narrating for about 2.5 years now. And my introduction to audiobooks was I was actually in pursuit of something else. And someone said, "Have you ever thought about narrating?" And I met some amazing people. One of them was Jayme Mattler, who just really took the time to teach me a lot of things about narrating, about the industry, networking. And throughout my career, I've worked with her and some other people who just like constantly pour into me and just help guide me through the process. So I love what I do. I'm really thankful for not just the work that I get to do, because that's also exciting and thrilling, and we'll get into that later, I guess. But the community is also something that I really cherish, being a narrator.
That sounds great. So Jayme, would you like to give a quick introduction?
Sure. My name is Jayme Mattler. I'm a narrator, but I came into narration through the production side. I'm also an audio engineer. I started off engineering and directing audiobooks, and then moved into producing and narrating. So I kind of do it all in the industry. Yeah. And I meet people like Joniece, and I do coaching and help lead the way.
Great. So yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of different aspects involved in this industry that I hadn't sort of like understood before. So I'm really interested to find out a bit more about that later on. Kate, would you like to introduce yourself now?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Kate Rudd. I am an audiobook narrator, and I do it full time. I've been narrating for I think about 10 or 11 years now. And kind of like Joniece, I came into it not expecting it to be my vocation. I was looking for more a stopgap measure to kind of fill some space as I was looking for a different job. And I happened to live really close to one of the audiobook publishers that was very busy at that time, Brilliance Audio in Grand Haven, Michigan. And so I just started kind of, trying to get an audition with them, thinking that maybe I could get 1 or 2 books to hold me over while I looked for another job. But as soon as I started narrating, I really fell in love with it, and it was a great fit. And I kind of grew into that work for the last, 10 years, and I'm just absolutely love it.
Wow, that's great. So yeah, I love it when sort of we find something that really fits with us, even if we're not expecting it. Because I definitely found that with writing, because I started off just writing sort of a bit as an extra, and then I found it was like what I wanted to do forever. So yeah, I really resonate with that. Yeah, so you've all talked a bit about how you got into the audiobook industry and how you became a narrator. So were there any surprises or anything sort of included in this industry that was a bit of a secret first that you hadn't expected? So I'll just throw this question out there to like any of you who want to answer it can.
Things we hadn't expected. I went to school for audio engineering, and I worked in music studios for a few years after graduating. And I didn't know what an audiobook was. I remember I had been living in New York for a year trying to get some studio work, and somebody wrote me and said, "I know this studio owner. He's hiring. Like, you should go interview. Give me your resume." I said, "Okay." So I went in, and he's interviewing me, and he's like, "So we record audiobooks here." And I said, "Cool. What's an audiobook?" And, I just took this job on a whim. And I think this is sort of, the surprising thing Joniece was talking about it, Kate was talking about it. audiobooks weren't a big thing more than 10 years ago. There were people doing it for sure, but it sort of exploded when Audible started making them available to the masses, digital apps, that kind of thing. And I think a lot of us were like, oh, what's this thing? I guess I'll try it out. And it turns out it's really fantastic to tell stories for a living. So here I came from the music world. And I thought I was just going to work in music, work with bands. I'd work at record stores, concert promoters, music studios. And I thought that was the rest of everything for me. And now I've been working in voiceover for over a decade, and I really, really like it. So I think that's probably the most surprising thing, that I just didn't know about it or that I would like it this much.
Okay, well, that's good. Yeah, Kate and Joniece, do you have anything that you'd like to add at this point?
Yeah, something that comes to mind for me that was definitely a surprise was that, while I don't know anyone who's getting rich doing this work, I was surprised that it was work I could find and build the skills to the point that I could work steadily and that I could keep a roof over my children's head and actually, raise my kids while working as a storyteller. I just had no idea that was an option available to me before finding audiobooks. And so that has been one of the biggest honors of my life. My girls are 20 and 18 now, and the formative years of raising them were carried on the back of an audiobook. So I'm really always grateful for that surprise, that it is a competitive industry and it is, sometimes busy and sometimes slower, but within all of that context, it is possible to have a vocation and a career that, provides for the bills. And I just didn't know that could happen for me.
That's really great. Yeah.
I think the thing that surprised me the most, that was the most unexpected, was how much I actually enjoyed it. Because I was just curious. I'm that kind of person. I'm like, oh, there's a door open. Let me just peek through and see what's happening, see what people are doing in there. And I think my audition pieces that I worked on, Jayme probably knows them well because we worked on them a lot. I almost had them memorized. I worked on them so much. But I was like, this is fun. These stories are really funny. And I was just surprised about how, I don't know, just like how much fun it is. And like Kate was saying, the ability to actually make a living at it and do it often enough that you can take care of yourself and take care of a family. I had a friend, another actor friend, who was like, yeah, you're doing audiobooks, but that's not what you really want to be doing, right? And I was like, I kind of do. I kind of like it over here. So that was also surprising too, that as an actor, in particular, an actor in New York, it's like, you need to get on Broadway or you better be on somebody's TV show. So when I started sliding into this other place, it was kind of, it was new and different, but I'm happy to be over here. It's fun.
Yay!
Hello. Yeah, apparently it just didn't like my headphones, so.
Okay, well, great to have you here now. Would you like to introduce yourself? Because we've just done introductions and talking a bit about how they got started in the industry. So if you'd like to introduce yourself now, that would work nicely.
I'm sorry, you're coming in very broken up.
We just finished doing introductions, Emily, if you want to just tell a little bit about yourself.
Okay, hi. I am an audiobook narrator and producer, and I have been doing voiceovers since about 2005 and an audiobook since about 2009. My specialties include East Asian American narratives and YA, sci-fi fantasy, and yeah, happy to be here.
Great. So how did you get involved in the audiobook industry then, Emily?
I was already doing voiceover, so I was always on the lookout for more voiceover work, and saw an audition for what was at the time BBC Audiobooks America. I was their America branch, which no longer exists. So yeah, created a demo, submitted a demo, got called in for an audition, went to audition, and that was that.
Great. So, yeah, so we were just talking a bit about any sort of surprises that you had, sort of when you started doing this work, if there was anything that was involved in it that you hadn't anticipated. So, is there anything that you would like to add on that as well?
Well, I don't know what everyone else has said, but I had primarily been working in animation before I started doing audiobooks. So I was used to very extreme characters. And when I got in the booth, which is actually, it's different now because we're now talking 13 years later, right? But at the time, I was told to vanilla it down like a lot. Yeah, because they were like, well, they're reading. They don't want to be given all of this color. I was like, okay. So
I think people like more character voices these days.
yeah, I agree. I agree. They're more into it now. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because, you know, bringing that kind of stuff up, we have to talk about like how the art form has changed too. What it was like 30 years ago, what it was like 15 years ago, what it was like 10 years ago, and how maybe it's changed even a little bit in the last couple years.
Yeah.
And the ability to sort of, as an actor, recognize that things are changing and that you have to be a little bit malleable. It's not, well, I've learned how to do it and I'm done. That's it. But stylistically, you know, it used to be much more presentational, and now it's much more conversational. And people like more and more character voices now, where a lot of people used to do very subtle, almost no character voices.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Because like my debut novel at the moment is being produced as an audiobook, and I was actually able to talk with my narrator for it, and she sent me these samples quite early on with all the different character voices, and I was just like having so much fun listening to that because it was just so exciting. So yeah, I'm glad like it's fun for you as well, creating these different character voices, because that's like my favorite part of listening to an audiobook, really. But yeah, how important is it for you as a narrator to connect with the main character of an audiobook when you're narrating it? I'll just throw this question out there again, so you can just reply as you like.
I'll go. For me, it's very important. Not that I have to be exactly like that person, or, you know, but the ability to understand them and understand how that is a piece of myself so that I can make that character as authentic as possible, so that it feels good while I do it and it feels real when someone else hears it. I think when I've tried to do characters who were too far from myself that I couldn't relate to or didn't see myself in, I felt like I became a try-hard instead of just being.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I need to have the exact same personal experiences. I think my job as an actor is always to find the truth of whatever is driving any character at any given moment. And so I need to be able to understand what that is. Like, do I need to have personal experiences that align? No. Yeah, because, you know, I can understand motivation that's driven by love or sadness or feeling spited or whatever, right? Justice. Oh, what was I gonna? Oh, whatever. It's early for me.
I've never thought about that. Getting into the connecting with the character. I just feel like it happens. So it's like, that's a really interesting question. But I think what I learned most from the main character is I get more of a sense of the author's voice through that character. So I feel like I don't know. It's like in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, the author is driving this story through this main character. She's my vehicle. So how comfortably can I sit in this? And as Emily was saying, the journey is kind of already paved out for you. So you know what the motivation is, you know where they're going. And it's like, just get in the car and go along for the ride and support it as best you can with your instrument. But I think I'm going to be thinking about that as I approach other books, like, oh, I don't know. I'm just going to be more aware of it. So thank you for asking that question.
And actually, I remembered what I wanted to add on to that, is that when and if there are personal experiences that align, for example, when I've had Asian American authors who have written about the experience of being in the US or whatever, or falling in love, but also having this cultural piece, that's extra special. It's not required, but it is extra special. And I think that'd be true for not just as a narrator, but I think that's true for listeners or readers as well, right? It's just like, oh my God, somebody actually knows what this experience is like, and you feel seen, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's such an important part. Yeah, so you talked a bit earlier about characters' voices. So I'd love to know how you go about constructing all the different character voices. Like, is this something that you prepare beforehand before you start sort of reading the book, or do you make notes as you're reading it and then sort of play around with different voices?
I think every actor probably has their own process. So I can only speak for mine as I'm approaching a story, but I don't spend that much time workshopping particular vocalizations before I approach a book. Most of the work of hearing what the character is going to end up sounding like, for me, I'm able to drop into that as I'm reading the story for the first time, because my experience as a reader has always been kind of a high sensory experience. I really imagine the scene visually as I read, and I've always done so. And I think I sort of hear the characters as I read, if I'm reading in a relaxed state where I'm not thinking about my job. So I try to have like a neutral read through and be relaxed enough to start to hear the characters as I would imagine them. And then it's just a matter of finding a hook and finding my way into where it feels true to what that initial picture was as I'm working. Sometimes I go back and change things, and decide I want to do a character differently. But usually it's kind of just a natural flow. I'm always hoping to find the flow of it and let it fill out more throughout the story.
Yeah, that makes sense. So is it similar for the rest of you then, or do you have sort of very different processes?
I mean, sometimes the author will give you specific ways that the character may sound, but I think that speaks to what Kate is saying. It's just that even adds to the imagery, the way they're described physically can inform the sound, and also what they're after, what their motivation is. So it's like how they sound, but also what's the intention behind what they're saying is going to inform, and not even just what they're saying, but like what do they want out of this moment from the other character. Like it's kind of something I guess you kind of intuit as you're preparing. So sometimes for me, even I might not write down like a whole chart and vision board or anything, but like I'll know, my body knows, my mind remembers that image for that moment.
I let it be a little organic. I don't think too much about what I'm going to do once I start narrating. I have sort of like a character sheet written out with who's in the story and a little bit about each person, maybe how old they are, what gender they are, where they're from, if there are any like distinguishing character traits, either personality-wise or looks-wise. And then as I'm going along, I feel like once they start speaking for the first time, it just sort of feels organic to the story, and I just trust my instincts. And then I go with it. Like Kate said, I might go back and redo somebody, but for the most part, once I'm rolling, I really just let that internal instinct kick in.
got to unmute myself then. Yeah, that's really interesting. So yeah, sort of building on that and sort of how you create different character voices and whether it comes sort of like really like almost innately to you. Is that the same sort of skill set that you would use for incorporating tension into the audiobook as well? So I guess what I'm asking is, what are some of your methods that you use in narration to build tension into your performances? And is this something that you actively, like, consciously have to be aware of doing, or does this all come naturally as well? So yeah, Jayme, do you want to answer that one first? And we can go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, you know, there are certain styles of writing that I think start to speak to you and let you know, like, this is how this should be said. I don't think that I narrate every single book the same way. The writing sort of starts to shape it. As far as tension goes, like, there's one stylistic choice that I like to do sometimes, but it's not like a always do this. It's a fail safe, never goes wrong. But sometimes if there's a really intense moment driving, or like it's like mysterious in a thriller or something like that, I might start to speak quickly, but sit in the beats of my periods a little bit. And what that sounds like is, instead of "she was walking down the street, she sensed somebody was behind her, she had to reach the corner," I would go a little faster and wait in between. "She was walking down the street. She could sense someone was behind her. She had to get to the corner." So instead of having a little more melody or a little slower or flowery, I just sort of take everything out and go a little faster. But it's not rushed or anything like that. I think that that can add a little tension in a moment.
Yeah, definitely. I could really hear just from the examples that you gave then. So that was really, really interesting. Emily, do you want to go next for answering that same question as well?
Sorry, I couldn't hear. I was having some noise interference.
Yeah, do you want to answer the same question? So what sort of methods you use to build tension into your narration?
Right. Yeah. For me, this comes very naturally. It is not something that I consciously try to do. I find if I'm consciously trying to, the word tension, the word tension is complicated because, like Kate was saying, right, we want to have as free-flowing, connected, natural read as possible. So we don't want tension, right? Where tension comes in, I think, is we're honoring what is written. If there's no real written tension in the scene, I'm not gonna add something that isn't there. If the author has put it there, then sure, I will honor that. And what Jayme was talking about with as a very technical fix to I guess you could see it as either a technical problem or an emotional problem for the scene. I approach it emotionally. So the technical stuff comes naturally when I'm approaching it from the emotional side, which is, what is this character going through? When she was talking about, reading faster and then pausing between sentences, for me, a character who's under that particular kind of tension, or let's use a different word, who's where the stakes are really high and where they're under a lot of emotional distress, they would probably be thinking in that kind of pattern where it'd be like, okay, here's a sentence. Oh, right. Okay, here's the next thing. Yeah, you're right. So that kind of technical, that is how it looks technically, but my approach is emotional.
That also makes me think about, I'm so glad we're having this conversation. I feel like I'm getting back to my roots, but it makes me think about, as an actor, you learn about given circumstances when you're working on a scene. And it's something that I think I've taken for granted. It's like, as an actor, I know these things, but I don't always consciously think about them. But I'm inside of the story. I'm in this scene with this character. I'm very aware of her given circumstances. So all of that is going to inform how the lines come out, because it's all invested in what she's going through. So if she's being chased down the street, or if she thinks someone is behind her but she's not sure, those things inform it. But I think it's also valuable when you have a director with you, right? So like, I'm just thinking about moments when I've worked with Jayme. Let's say something, I delivered a line and she's like, wait a minute, I like the phrase, we can get a little more cheese out of that hole. Not that that's something Jayme ever says, but but if she's like, okay, make this adjustment, right? And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that sits in the pocket more. So I think it's a matter of, sometimes you're just marrying like all that instinctual stuff, the intuition with the given circumstances, and the technical. It just all comes together in like the best way.
Yeah, every single thing that has been suggested, I just want to say like yes, 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 and yes. I just love this conversation. If from another aspect of how I work too, I would add that if I know there's tension in the scene, if I know that there's deliberate, we're trying to bring the reader somewhere, and it should be a gradual thing with a pow at the end, you know, if I know that that's written into the book, I will be able to get there more easily if I'm not chopping up my recording session too much in the hour or so before that moment. So I try to time, especially if I'm self-directing. When I have a director that a client has provided for me, I can be a little more relaxed about all of that, because I know that safety net is there. And if I am drifting a little or need to give it another shot, they're going to help me get there. But if I'm self-directing, I try to set myself up to have uninterrupted time in that session where I know that scene is coming, so that I can gradually, along with the listener, arrive at the place of fear or high stakes or surprise or violence even, as surprised almost as they are by that moment. I want to feel my own hair on the back of the neck stand up, ideally. I want to be a little spooked out myself. And so I have to not be hitting pause and running to do a thing and take a break and fill the water jug. I try to plan so that there's going to be a stretch of time in the studio that is just flow. And that helps me get there in those kind of scenes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like Kate and Joniece, you both mentioned about directors and the role of directors in this industry. So this is something that I know very little about, and I kind of, until I had my own audiobook being produced, I didn't really realize that there were so many people involved. Like, I very naively just thought you just had a narrator and that was it. So can one of you sort of like talk me through in like very basic terms the different stages involved in audiobook production, and like how many different people would work on one audiobook? Yeah, I'll just throw this out there again. I don't want to like put one of you on the spot with this.
Well, I've done a lot of production work, so I'll take the lead and you guys can fill in the gaps. I mean, like the further back you go, you start talking about the acquisitions team who acquires the rights to an audiobook, because whatever publisher publishes the print version may not own the rights to the audio. So that's how you end up with companies like Brilliance, where Kate got her start, or Audible, or Blackstone, where I used to be a director engineer, where they weren't producing books, but they were producing audiobooks. Once it ends up in-house and people are ready to produce it, there's a producer who reads through the book and either picks a narrator for that book, or pitches a few narrators to an author, or, got a fly in my apartment, or gets a few auditions from maybe 5 different narrators and pitches those to the author. Within the last 5+ years, authors have started to really want to have author approval on their audiobooks, which wasn't really a thing before because people, again, didn't really know about audiobooks. So authors would sell the rights and nobody knew what happened to the audio. Now audiobooks are such a big thing. Authors love being part of the process, so they want author approval, which is why more narrators have to do more auditions than they used to. Once the narrator's chosen, then it sort of depends on the company. Some companies have a producer, director who goes through the whole script and looks up pronunciations, and they hold your hand through the whole process, and they direct you, and they manage post-production. Some companies have their own in-house staff that find pronunciations for you, and you self-record, and then they have a post-production staff to work on it. Some places outsource things to other companies, and then you have to do all your own research, but they'll do post-production for you. So it sort of runs the gamut. It could be many different ways. I definitely think it's easier if you're working with a publisher who looks up pronunciations for you or helps you with pronunciations, but we don't always have that luxury.
Okay, that's great because, yeah, as I said, like before, I'm looking at it all from the author side of things anyway, and so I was aware of like the narrator, and there was an editor working on it after the narrator had finished. But yeah, like there's this whole other side of the industry that's very much hidden from authors in a way. So like it's kind of like all this work goes on sort of behind the scenes, and that I knew nothing about. So it's really fascinating learning about all of this. Yeah, so what is your favorite thing about narrating YA thrillers in particular? Joniece, should we start with you?
I mean, full disclosure, most of my YA narration has been sci-fi fantasy, and I mean, there's some suspense going on in there, but I think for me, it's just some of the work that I've been a part of. I just love like the magic in it, the the otherworldliness. I love being inside of the heroine and like journeying with her through we're starting out always at a disadvantage, and journeying with her to discover herself, to discover her power, and in a lot of cases changing the world, and that has been so exciting because for me, as starting as a narrator, I was also coming back into just reading more. And there were some genres I didn't even know existed, and it just kind of blew me away. So I'm having fun as a narrator and offering myself as an actor to this work, and just enjoying bridging that gap. But also just as a reader, it's just like, oh wow, this is just a lot of fun material, and it was not around when I was a girl. So that's what I have to offer.
I would always go back to with being in a YA suspense and YA thriller space. I love how the characters make big decisions, and young people see things with clarity, and young people are willing to take risks, and they tend to make strong decisions and quicker decisions than we do sometimes as adults. So I love what those qualities can do as plot devices to move a book forward, to throw it sideways, to take the plot in directions that are really interesting. And when it's written well, I think it's also really clear that young people see falsity quite well, and they identify when something isn't right or when their gut feels off. And so they can be great investigators, they can be great problem solvers, and they can fight their way out of tricky situations. And so I think when it's done well, it's just a joy to kind of be on that careening train of a YA thriller as an actor, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Emily, do you have anything that you'd like to add? Emily, do you have anything that you would like to add?
Sure. Sorry, I was getting that noise interference again. Yeah. So with thriller in particular, so as piggybacking onto what Kate was talking about, where younger people are more quick to take action, and I would say that there's also a more raw sense of justice that needs to be reckoned with, and young people have both, actually more than two things. They have energy. They have not been beaten down by the world and had, not to this, perhaps not necessarily, of course everybody has different experiences, but usually that they don't have the kinds of experiences that make older people temper their decisions, right? Say, well, I don't know that this is actually going to be a good choice. But so the younger people are more willing to take the risks, and they have the energy to recover from those risks if it comes with dire consequences. And I mean, for me, thriller is a fantasy, right? I don't like thriller existing in too much of a real world kind of environment, because then that turns into horror or true crime sort of situation. That's not fun for me. But as fantasy, as this idea that, yeah, I could eliminate forever all of my worst enemies, be gone. And this is how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it in a way that's really almost cartoonishly, in my head, it has to be cartoonishly gruesome, right? In order to be, you know what I'm saying. So they have all of that going for them. Yeah, and then so that's YA and thriller, particularly in where they intersect. The emotions just run so much higher and so much more of a raw way. I think that's really a pleasure with YA thriller. With mature adult, I don't know, adult thriller. It can also be. I wouldn't say that adult thriller is fun. I wouldn't. It has. I enjoy it, but it's not fun in the way that YA thriller is fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, especially what you were saying about how you prefer like thriller if it's in fantasy. Like from my point of view as a writer, I really relate to that, because I like writing thrillers and tense scenes, but if they're a bit too close to sort of like true life, it's not as much escapism for me, and it starts to like bog me down a bit, and it just feels quite heavy. So although I like writing YA thrillers that are contemporary, if I'm doing that without any sort of speculative aspect, I pretty much choose a setup or an inciting event that would never really happen. So then it's kind of like more sort of removed from everyday life, and I just find that a lot easier to deal with as a writer, unless I want to be really like bogged down by everything one day, and then I might work on one. But yeah, that's really interesting to me to hear that you have the same reaction like as a narrator as well. And yeah, I can totally understand that. Yeah, Jayme, is there anything that you would like to add to this?
Yeah, I really like what Emily was talking about. Like the stakes are just so high for YA, where it's not just bad, it's the worst. It's not just a good outcome, it's the best. Everything is like so amplified. Whereas like if a problem happens in an adult thriller, it's like, this is bad. What are we going to do? And if it's in YA, it's like, this is the worst. What, and it's like, let's get into action. And like, it's really fun. And yeah. And instead of it just being like a harrowing true tale, it can go in other directions that are a little more fantasy related and fun. Yeah, man, I was just enjoying what Emily was talking about so much. Like, what exactly is the question again? Just what do I like about YA thriller?
Yeah, like what's your favorite thing about narrating this genre in particular?
YA in general, I enjoy because there tend to be there tends to be a large variety of characters versus just like, a simplistic version of like uh, a male and a female in a romance who are going to fall in love, or, I don't know, tough, I don't know, whatever. I just feel like in the same way when you watch teen movies, there's like the jokester and the jock, and we get like these stereotypes, but people get even beyond those and they start to be really creative. What types of teenagers exist in this world? What types of young people exist in this world? I feel like it allows you as a performer to sort of stretch your character voices. You're delving into what is this person like, how do they see the world, where with adult stuff people tend to be a lot more similar, even though they might have different emotional things going on. They tend to just not like show the spectrum of different types of people, so that makes it really fun.
I want to just jump onto that too. It's something that we haven't really talked about yet, is that I will say for YA as a whole, not just thriller, YA writers, authors have been quicker to embrace including characters and talking about complexity of characters that are more diverse. Adult writers it just took them a lot longer. It's still taking them. Some people are still not quite on the train. So I've really appreciated that about YA, where they, for whatever reason, which maybe Madeline, you can speak more to, I think it's on the author publisher side of things. But YA authors have been more capable, willing, and able to put in diverse characters, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. Like from my point of view as a writer, we're definitely being encouraged to include more diversity. Like I'm a disabled writer, and I remember when I was working on my debut novel, my editor didn't really want any disability representation in my book, even though it was based on my own experiences. Because it was a dystopian thriller, she said, "Oh, we wouldn't get any disabled people surviving in this land," and I was like, "Wow." And I was like, I had like this massive long conversation about how I really wanted, like if it wasn't my main character, I wanted another prominent main character to be disabled. And I was just like made to think that that wouldn't be commercial enough. And I was talked out of it. But with like the future books that I've written like after that, and I was talking to my agent about representation as well. And yeah, because I signed with her after I'd had that experience, and she was really encouraging of me, and she was saying, if an editor says that again, then just don't listen. And it is really important to get like the representation for all like the different like minorities, and because we need that representation, and it is really important. So yeah, Emily, I can definitely agree with what you're saying there, and I'm really pleased when like I see more YA books being more open to including characters of different diversities as well. So yeah, that's really important. But yeah, for the next question, this is one that I've really been looking forward to asking. So I would love to ask, what is the weirdest or funniest thing that's happened to you as a narrator? And I'm just really excited to hear what you're going to say. So who would like to go first, or shall I pick one of you? Okay, I'm going to pick one of you. Joniece, would you like to answer this first, and then we can sort of like go around?
I am still processing that question. I don't know. You have to come back to me. Let me think on that.
Jayme, would you like to answer?
I'm sort of at a loss. The weirdest or funniest thing that's happened to me as a narrator. I don't know. it's fun work. It's good work. I don't know. I don't know any weird stuff that's particularly happened to me. Getting invited on a panel about YA thriller, that might be the weirdest thing that's happened to me.
That's a
I
good
got
answer.
a funny. I have a funny. It's kind of gross, but whatever, you asked. So
Yeah.
sometimes when you're narrating, well, I've learned that a lot of burps happen. And I didn't know why, but then an engineer was explaining because you're talking so much and you're taking in so much air that, I mean, the burps come. Sorry, this is they just got. And someone said to me, an engineer said, "Don't worry, Joniece, you won't believe the sounds that I've heard on the other side." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So that's my weird thing. That's all I got for you.
Okay.
As an engineer, I can confirm lots of burping in session. Tons and tons of burping.
I have a weird one, kind of. Most of my job is spent, all by myself. So I don't get as many, funny or strange situations because our job is so solitary. But there was a time a few years ago where I was invited to be a guest at a con that isn't happening anymore, but was at the time, called NerdCon Stories. So I went to Minneapolis the first year and it went well and we had fun. And it was just a gathering of about 5,000 nerds from around the country, and nerds being defined and celebrated as people who are unapologetically enthusiastic about an area of interest. And so it represented all the gamut of storytelling, fandoms. It was just a really interesting and kind of bizarre grouping of ideas. And so all weekend we did our panels and we had fun. And there were, of course, with that many people kind of sharing over the weekend, there became all these inside jokes. And I can't even remember, during one of the skits, somehow a potato became part of the whole joke for the weekend. Maybe someone in the audience tossed one onto the stage, maybe it was planned, but there was something about a potato that kept on being like the running joke all week. And so the next year, when it was time to submit our proposals to maybe come and be a guest again, instead of typing it out, I actually Sharpied it onto some little Yukon Golds and mailed it in a box. And they accepted it. And they invited me back. So
That is so good.
my conference proposal was, I was like, well, these people are weird enough like me that maybe it'll be funny. And if it's not funny, then I just won't go. But it was fine. It worked out.
Yeah. I'm getting the interference again. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of noises, and I recognize, Madeline, that you're English. And so here's a funny side story, or I don't know, funny. It's an interesting side story. I lived in Hong Kong for a couple of years, which is where my mom's family is from, or they're from the Guangdong region anyway. And I had grown up in LA around a lot of Asians and Chinese. And so going to Hong Kong wasn't a culture shock for me. It was like, oh yeah, no, I spoke the language. I ate all the food. I knew how the culture did and all of that. But because Hong Kong was a British colony for 100 years, that was a shock to me. It was like, oh, you think this is rude? Oh, you think this is you think this is funny? Oh, interesting. No, I don't think anything of burps and stomach gurgling and farts and eating bones in animals and things like this, right? Anyway, so that's related to, I guess, what is going on, what goes on in the booth. I am not a I am a burper, but I am not an other kind of gas releaser. I have heard stories about that there are narrators who are, and with gusto. So that's funny. A fun fact, I don't know if it's funny, but some narrators are, a lot of us work from home, and sometimes, especially in the summertime, if we live in a particular place that has extreme temperatures, it can get really hot in there. It gets hot in there anyway, even if you're not in the middle of summer, because it's a closed box that doesn't have good air circulation. And you're talking for an hour. So you're exerting energy and also air, hot air. So some female narrators I've heard, well, not just female narrators, male narrators too. We do all sorts of tricks to cool ourselves down in the booth. But a fun one that I like for female or narrators with breasts is to put a sports bra in the freezer. And then you put it on in the booth and it's like instant cooler. I love that. Or there's like just generally putting ice cubes. One of my very good friends, she used to do that, not even in the booth. She would just like, Joniece is like, oh my God. Yeah, it's great. I mean, imagine, you could do it with any article of clothing. It doesn't have to be a sports bra, but yeah.
You just saved me, Emily. I've been freezing water bottles and like wrapping them in towels and just holding them on my lap. But this sports bra is getting frozen.
Nice.
No, because I'm struggling in there. Like the sweat is just so. Pro tip. That was a pro tip.
All right, you guys, I'm so sorry I have to go. I've got a session in 2 minutes, but it was so great to see you guys, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So there's one more question left. I think we've got time just for like a couple minutes on it, but it's what advice do you have for aspiring narrators? Emily, would you like to go first?
Sure. Well, I guess it depends on where that person is with their acting training. If you are a trained actor, great. Then train specifically with some audiobook coaches. If you are not, then I would recommend probably taking some acting classes and an additional voiceover and then an audiobook specific training. Basically, my advice is train. And that's not just with paying other people. I mean, yes, you should probably do that. It is really helpful, and it's not something that most people will intuit all of the answers to. I mean, because of the pandemic, there is a wealth of information. I know that I've been doing a lot of things for free. So there's a lot of information out there that you can get on your own, but there's nothing like real world practice with somebody else who's listening and watching and giving you feedback. But that said, practice on your own, right? So like, see what it's like to read out loud for yourself. Not just read out loud, perform out loud for yourself it depends on if you want to do it full time or not, but start with an hour, then move to 2, move to 3, move to 4, 5, 6 hours in a day. How does that feel? Right? Yeah. So that's what I would say.
I don't know what to add really beyond that, because I think that's exactly right. Train, seek out the information, because part of entering this field of working as a narrator, one of the skills that's needed is being self-motivated and being good at finding information, because this is a research heavy line of work, and kind of not being intimidated by barriers you may bump into along the way. So I guess when people come to me and say, hey, this sounds really interesting and I might want to get into this, I'm not sure if they mean that because they want something to fill their time. I'm not sure if it's something they've always wished to do and have a deep love of books and storytelling. I don't know on that scale of like commitment where they're coming from. But I always direct people to start by doing some reading and some training and find out, like Emily said, how does it feel if you're alone reading aloud for hours at a time? For some people, this is going to be a job that you absolutely love. For some people, I have a friend he's a beautiful actor. He brings this wonderful energy every time he's on camera. And I thought he would love audiobooks. He tried one book and he said, I cannot be expected to sit still for as long as I'm going to need to sit still. This is my body hates it and I can't do it. So that was not for him, you know? So I would say start at a website like narratorsroadmap.com is a really good starting point for people who are interested in researching and figuring out what kind of investment of time and education it's going to take. That's a great place to start. And eventually there will be coaching and training along the way. And if you do love it and you really do feel determined to enter that vocation, anyone can. There's a place for you. We want people who love this work to join us, but it is a competitive field and it's not an easy line of work. And so it just needs to fit. It'll either fit or it won't.
Yeah, I think there's this sense that voiceover is easy. That's something that's come in. Kate, would you mind? Sorry, would you mind muting? There, thank you. There's a sense that voiceover work is easy, and that audiobook work is easy because it's just reading out loud. It's like, oh, I do that with my children every night. And it's not. It does come more naturally to some than others, but even if it does come naturally to you, it's still work. I love this work. I really do, and I've been doing it for a long time. And you won't last. It's like Kate was saying, you won't stick around. Whether it takes you 1 book or 10 books to realize that, or 2 years, if you don't love it, you're not going to stick around. It's too hard. Because it's not just the actual work itself. It's like what Kate was saying, it's all the things surrounding it. You have to be willing and able to be your own business person, advocate, and all of the things that are around. You're still an actor in the end. I mean, this is an acting job. So if you're unfamiliar with that world, then that's a whole nother learning curve that you're going to have to hurdle and get past. There's also technical aspects. We are our own tech people and tech support. So yeah, I think there's this idea that you can just kind of do it for fun once in a while because my friends say I have a nice voice. I don't know, maybe, but dive in, see, and recognize that it might have more challenges than you may think.
I just want to add to that. I mean, I second that emotion with everything that they said, but Emily and Kate said, but being a new narrator, my first year was the year before the pandemic happened. And so I went from, oh, Joniece, girl, you don't need to get a home studio. Just go in and, they'll have a studio for you, girl. Don't get a home studio. And then it was March 16th. And if you didn't have a home studio, you would in trouble. So I took a list that I had. I immediately ordered everything. Thank God I did then. And it's all started to come in. And there were moments where I'm trying to figure out, and nobody could come to my home to help me figure this out. I'm literally sitting on the floor of my closet crying because I don't understand what's, so it was like this quick learning curve. I'm trying to figure out how to go from, I'm still learning how to narrate to, okay, keep learning how to narrate and now learn how to build a studio in your home, in your studio apartment, okay, studio on a studio, and learn how to engineer yourself. And there were moments where I was just like, I don't wish this on nobody. You might think you want to be a narrator, but not in 2020, because it was so much. But like Emily was saying, I love what I do. so it was something that I was willing to and willing to I am, what am I trying to say? I was willing to, and I'm willing to now to figure it out because I enjoy it so much. And what Kate was saying before too, like it's providing a living for me. So I'm just happy that I have that love for it. The other thing, I was going to add something else to just I enjoy listening to other narrators. That also informs how I go back into the booth. So when I have time to listen to some of my favorite narrators, I get a sense of their pace, their phrasing, how they're. I'm tracking their characters, so I'm just like imagining. Well, how did they come up with that voice for that character? I'm stealing stuff. Like if y'all listen to some of my stuff, you probably heard yourselves in my book, like I'm stealing it. So those are some of the things that I've been through and would just like to share.
Wow, thank you so much for your insight on that. Like, it's really interesting for me because before this panel, I pretty much knew very, very little about audiobook narration. So it's really like opened up my eyes to everything that's going on behind the scenes and exactly what the work, what it involves. So yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for joining me on this panel and for giving up your time for this. So yeah, it's been really great having you all here.
Thank
Thanks, Madeline.
you. This was
Thank
great.
you so much. Yeah, it's been fun.